should love Tom Nolan because he certainly loves you.
All right. We are live.
Wonderful. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, despite the fact that the Phoenix Suns are, well, it's life or death for the Phoenix Suns tonight. And it's been a great season. So who can blame anybody for staying home to watch it? But for those of you
I do. I blame them.
chose to come and see,
I blame them.
and Joe and I were just saying it's been too long because we've been together for all of his books. Zoom is just not the same, is it?
No, it isn't. It really isn't. I mean, most of the time, I'm looking at my own face. I'm talking to myself.
That's a scary
and
thought.
that's unpleasant.
We had a couple of good sessions, though, regardless.
We do. We always do.
Zoom.
Yeah,
it was
no,
fun.
I know, but it's just not the same as
No,
actually having your wonderful presence here, plus dinner afterward and all the
Well,
fun stuff that we
it's
do.
nice to talk to actual people.
Yeah.
You know, I was just saying that I'm by myself about 90% of the time, and so it's almost a surprise. Hi, hello.
Well, I am holding a cheat sheet called the Wall Street Journal, and there is a mystery review most of the weeks, but not every week, by Tom Nolan. And he chose on, what date is it? Sunday, May 6th, to write an entire column about Joe and his new book, and he loved it. So I'm going to just say a few words here from this. It's the latest entry in his saga of Isaiah I.Q. Quintabe, a young black private investigator based in East Long Beach, California. Our hero, I.Q., is faced with a double dilemma. An outraged gang leader has put a bounty on his head, and his beloved girlfriend, Grace, has been kidnapped by a deranged and vengeful hitman. That's much more fun than just a guy in it for the money, isn't it? Deranged and vengeful.
I really like Tom Nolan's adjectives. I mean, he really gets in there.
And he skips the adverbs, so, paying attention. Right. So with that promising start, tell us what Fixit is all about in your own words.
Fixit. So at the end of the last IQ book, Grace was kidnapped by this hitman, Skip Hansen. At least that's what he calls himself. That appeared in the first book, in the first IQ book. And he was the guy that sent a giant pit bull to kill a music mogul, which I got from The Hound of the Baskervilles. And he is a lunatic. I mean, who would send a dog to kill somebody? And in that first book, Isaiah destroys his life, takes away his dogs, who are the only things on earth that love him, and sends him to prison. So he's been stewing all this time, and now he's out, and he wants revenge, but he can't locate Isaiah because he's in Northern California on another case. So he kidnaps Grace, uses her as bait to bring Isaiah in. And it's a difficult situation for Isaiah because he has to find Grace before she's killed. But if he does find her, they both might be killed because he'll have to find Skip. Skip has Grace. And so it's a really hard situation for him. And part of it's cat and mouse. And part of it is thriller, like most of my books. And some old characters make appearances, new characters make appearances. For example, did you ever think a hitman had a mother?
Well, at one point, but maybe, I mean, reasonably, yes, but maybe not, still with us.
Well, her name is Jessica, and she has a long sheet, and she lives in this old and decrepit house, and Skip pays her to keep Grace in the basement. But along the way, Skip goes on a job. He's going on a job, $50,000 job. He has no money, just got out of prison. So his mother, Jessica, she doesn't want to keep a kidnapped woman in her basement. So Skip says, I'll pay you $50,000. And he says, I'll give you 10%. She says 20, but he has no choice. So Skip goes off on his job, and Jessica and Grace are alone. And she says, you should keep all the money. I'll help you. And so this other conspiracy starts. And that's one of the twists in Grace's story, that now she's conspiring with Skip's mother to take the $50,000. Unfortunately, Skip doesn't complete the job. He always completes the job, but he doesn't. And the guy who hired him only pays him $5,000. So he comes home with $5,000, and his mother thinks he's got the other 45 hidden somewhere. So she's furious. He's saying $5,000. She's saying, no, you always get paid half. So she's conspiring with Grace. So Jessica hits him over the head with a cast iron frying pan about 10 times. They have a long-standing, unpleasant relationship. And so Grace ends up locked in the basement with Skip. And now they're conspiring to get the hell out of there.
You better stop before we go too far here.
All right. Forget that. Forget all.
We don't want to know what happens in the basement after this point, there for sure.
But I know the story so well that
I know. You can't resist telling it. This reminds me of the time that John Sanford was having trouble plotting his next book. And so when he was here, instead of talking about the book that was here, he wanted everybody's help to plot the new book. And people kept saying,
that's John.
I know it was John. They did
that sounds
anyway.
right.
But I figured they'd forget after, a year had gone past. So Grace and Isaiah clearly have a strained relationship, which has been a deal. But
They do.
before I ask Patrick to step in, remind us why, for those who may not know this series and may be watching, why is he called IQ, aside from the obvious of his name?
That is the neighborhood nickname. And first of all, his name, Isaiah Quintabe. I worked a long time finding a name that would match the initials IQ. I ended up making up the last name. So that's why he's called IQ. It was just in my head. I wanted him to be called IQ. So I had to manipulate around it so that that was
Reverse
his nickname.
engineered.
Yes, I do a lot of that. I know what I want in the first place, and then I have to go back and figure things out. So that's where it ends, which is how most mysteries are written.
So an adjective, Tom Nolan's adjectives coming into play, often applied to IQ, is Holmesian, right? For
Yes,
Sherlock,
very much so.
right?
Yes, I was a fringe kid. I was never in the mix. Always on the outskirts of things. I couldn't compete on any level. I wasn't a good student. I couldn't play sports. And so I was a watcher and a listener, which ended up serving me well. No, it didn't feel good at the time, but I wanted to compete. I mean, I wanted to have something to offer. No, it's like my neighbors, they could wear like beat up chinos and a t-shirt and they look cool. I look like I jumped off a freighter from North Korea. I was just, I just couldn't compete. One report card in the 7th grade, I got straight C minuses. It was some sort of record. Nobody had ever seen that before. I got a C minus in woodshop. The first assignment was simple. Template, you put it on a piece of plywood. You're supposed to look like a pig. So template, piece of plywood, cut around it, pig. And the teacher said, and I'll always remember this, he said, it looks like you dropped a pie. And it was just like an amoeba. I mean, it didn't come out at all like it was supposed to. So I got a C minus. No. And that's been pretty much my whole life. I really pretty much failed at everything until I wrote a novel. I can't do anything of a practical nature except write. Nothing. I'm not proficient in any other thing that I can make a living off of. My brothers had a saying about me that went, if your plane crashes in the Amazon and you need to survive, Joe is the one that you should kill and eat.
Wow.
I thought that was harsh. I thought that was.
Yeah, thanks.
But,
thought
but
that
you
was
can get
harsh.
your revenge on the page, right?
But yeah, it's totally true. And I had the first job I had was as a school teacher, and it was grades 4 to 6, one of those big open area classrooms. And I'm there 3 days, and I realize I don't like kids. I don't like them. I could barely stand them. They're noisy, and they're needy. I was asking you stuff, and really, I lasted 1 semester, and I quit before I was fired. Well, that was one of my jobs. Am I just rambling on here? Is that
Oh,
okay?
it's fine. We're all enjoying it.
So I did a bunch of other jobs. I was human resources in a big corporation, and I was director of an NGO, all these things. I never lasted more than a year. I was restless. I was bored, always. I had good intentions, but couldn't do it. And then I decided I want to be a screenwriter, out of the blue. I hadn't written anything before, but I had to support myself while I was trying to be a screenwriter. And one of the jobs was as a tour guide, see the homes of the stars, except I couldn't remember whose house was whose, and I'd forget the script. So we'd be going along, and I'd say, Lucille Ball lived in that house for 35 years. It wasn't Lucille Ball's house. I'd say Cary Grant grew up in this mansion. Cary Grant grew up in another country. So the bus driver thought it was funny, but I got fired anyway. I wrote exactly 12 lousy screenplays before I sold one to Disney. And then I started to work. I was selling specs and doing rewrites and assignments and stuff, but nothing I wrote ever got made. Every project I wrote, and I wrote a lot of them, fell out for one Hollywood reason or another. The head of the studio got fired. The budget was too big. The star dropped out. Another studio has something similar to it in the pipeline. And so one after the other just collapsed. And that's how you keep score. Not how many screenplays you write. It's how many you get made. And it was so frustrating because, if nothing else, I have a work ethic. So I'm really working hard and they keep collapsing. So I got so frustrated, I quit. Nobody noticed, but I quit. My agent didn't even call me. So I moped around for a couple of months. Like, I was feeling sorry for myself. It was a big part of my identity. If I'm not a screenwriter, who am I? And, I would take long, brooding walks and, look out at the sunset and stuff. And then I realized I got to pay my bills. And again, I don't know how to do anything but write. So I started IQ. I wish I had a more inspiring reason for starting it, but it was fear and desperation. And it took me 3 years to write. I had to take a second out on the house to write the book. It was my wife's idea, because I would have quit. She was a little nuts, but she's just like that. So it took me 3 years. And the first year, I thought I could write. I mean, I'm a screenwriter. I'm writing for a living. And but narrative prose is an entirely different animal. You have a house in a screenplay. It says exterior house, but you can't do that in a book. And there's all this dialogue, and there's novel structure in a particular way. So it took me a year just to be able to write clear, decent prose. I'm writing, essentials of style and all these writing books. It was humbling, to start out at the beginning, but it had to be done. And I think in terms of aspiring writers, that's the biggest thing standing between an aspiring writer and getting published is the writing itself. Separate and apart from content, character, possible franchise, you have a lot of great ideas. If you don't write at a high level, you're done. It's like saying, applying for a job at NASA and saying, you know what, I skipped the aeronautic stuff. You know, it's just too much math. You know, it's just that fundamental, because people like Barbara, if they read amateurish writing, they just close the book. And it's true with all the gatekeepers, all the editors, all the agents. If they see unprofessional writing, they just close the book. They can only judge what's on the page. That's it. So if you're a really nice guy and your parents are lion tamers, it does not matter. They do not care. Just here on the page. The prologue of IQ is like 3 pages long. I rewrote it 26 times. 7 different takes. I rewrote those because those were the first words an editor or an agent would read. And if they tripped on those words, I'm done. I know they're going in. So it took a long time to be a novelist. You know? And nobody really ever talks about money. Okay? Advances, you hear about $1 million advances, but they're so rare as to be irrelevant. From the big 5 publishers, the advances range from $25,000 to $100,000, most landing between $35,000 and $40,000. I got $100,000 for 2 novels. And the only reason I got a little more is because they didn't want to piss off my agent. And here's how the deal broke down. I got $40,000 up front, 20 for IQ, 20 for the book yet to be written. So when I finished the rewrites to my editor's satisfaction, that took months because my editor has a lot of other writers to service. Then I got another $15,000. And then on publication day, I got another $15,000, $70,000 over the course of a year, less 15% commissioned and taxes, and I got what I got. You know? And there's also this misconception about TV movie options. Despite what you hear, they are very rare. I mean, this is in the context of thousands of submissions. A big-time TV producer, the guy who's doing IQ, he said average option fee for a book is $500 to $7,500. And there was a 6-way bidding war for IQ. I got $22,500, which my agent said was extraordinary for a new book, less 15%. And taxes, and I got what I got. So, if you're going to make money, what happens is people like your 3rd book, then they go back and buy the 1st, and you get some momentum. But it takes a long haul for most writers to make money. You know?
Well, it does, but you also, as you point out, the more books you publish, then the more royalties you get from the early books. Which then go, to help you accumulate more money for the new book. That's what this writer's strike is about, in great part, is that the streaming has changed the residuals.
Yes.
And so people who used to get money writing, screenplays for television and for the movies and so forth, their income has really dropped because the fee structure and the residuals have largely gone away. But as an author, Joe, is going to make money for all of the books that he earlier published along with this one. And every time there's a new book, you have a chance to sell more of your earlier books for people who've never heard of you before, right? Yeah. So it does, you have to stick with it. And the general wisdom is, although I don't know this personally, that a series really comes into its own around book 6 or 7. It's very rare that, well, if it's one book, clearly it's not yet a series, so, they were okay. But in general, it takes a while. And, there's kind of a make or break moment when publishers and authors kind of have a come to Jesus moment and say, does the author really care enough to keep writing, or is the author bored, or does the publisher think that you ought to do something else?
Yeah, it's like you might hear somebody say, we're looking for the next Harry Bosch. But what they mean is they're looking for the next Michael Connelly. They're looking for someone who's good enough to sustain a career, book after book after book. That's the only way anybody makes any money. And so a new writer goes into it. I mean, it's sort of like they think, publishing is, some sort of philanthropic effort on behalf of literature, but it's a business. And, a publisher hopes they have a quality book that's commercial, but they're really looking for a product they can sell. And it's tough out there. It really is, especially for a new writer. Now, it's almost impossible for a new writer to cut through the book noise, as well as every other kind of entertainment noise. And you have to have a publisher behind you, to believe in your book. If they're going to spend money on you, they really have to believe this book. And that's why it's almost, if you're going to make a dent, the book has to have some heat on it. It has to have some buzz, great reviews, or it'll just be in Barnes and Noble for a week and then go away. And that's most of the books. That's most books. They may be good books, but if there's no heat, they're in Barnes and Noble for a week and then they're gone. So it's extremely competitive. There's only a finite number of dollars in the marketplace. So if you make a sale, you got to take one from somebody else. All right. So you're in your favorite independent bookstore, and you're looking between Dennis Lehane and John Sanford and Laura Lippman and the new guy. The new guy loses that battle.
No, not here.
Well,
No, Joe. We actually live to find the new authors and
yeah, you
support
found
them.
me.
That's right. And
Yes.
you know what? Way back, we found Michael Connelly, and we also found Dawn Winslow and Lisa C. who was coming. Her new book is so amazing. I'm still kind of, trying to recover from reading it yesterday. But seriously, it does take people like Patrick and people like, like me and the rest of the staff here to keep those books from being here more than a week.
Yes.
But actually, we sell more new novels a lot of the time than we do more established authors because we put a lot of effort into it. We
no one
want
should
you, right?
believe that Barbara is an average bookseller. She's just extraordinary.
No, it's not me. It's the
Yes.
whole team. No,
it's
it really
not. Patrick
is.
has nothing to do.
No.
You don't know how right you are.
No. I think we should let Patrick step in now and quiz you, Joe. Right. So,
No.
Patrick, try to overcome the sad picture with some enthusiasm.
No problem. I mean, there's so much to talk about with this book, But and we can do a deep dive. But I wanted to go back to what you said a minute ago about how you first came up with the idea of Isaiah. Now, we were talking in the back about point of view, kind of writerly stuff, and how these books are told in third person, and we're as opposed to the Philip Marlowe novel, Goodbye Coast, which is first person. Did you hear Isaiah's voice at first?
It's what I hear first. I hear dialogue. And I heard his voice. It was very even tempered. It was very almost monotone. Because I thought of him as a character who had presence. Not flashy, but presence. One of those guys who is in the room, even if he doesn't say anything. I thought of him that way. And I thought of the way he talked. And I usually start with dialogue. And I don't have a whole story in my head. I have a vague idea about what I'm going to do. Good guys win, bad guys lose. And then I write the first page. And I write the hell out of it. And I rewrite it over and over and over again. Because that's going to set the standard for the rest of the book. I can't write a page worse than page one. And when I began, I'm writing in increments. Page one informs page two. Page two informs page three. Then I was telling Patrick, I get to maybe 50, 60 pages. Then I look back and see everything that I messed up. Things are not contiguous. Things are missing, or opportunities were missed. So I go back and rewrite that first 50 pages. Then I go forward, then I go back, then I go forward. And the farther I go, the more things I see are missing. And I have to go back to the beginning and rework things. It's an incredibly inefficient way to write. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But
You could draw a real analogy though with Fixit, the notion of the title of this book and how
Yes.
he investigates it and the way you write.
Fix it. Yeah. I had a vague idea that Isaiah was going to rescue Grace. That was pretty much it. That was pretty much it. And as I write, I wrote the opening scene where the prologue where Grace is kidnapped. And then what logically follows after that? How would Isaiah react? And it's one of those things that you ask yourself. Aspiring writers say they get stuck. They get stuck. I don't know what to do next. But you ask yourself not what's going to happen next, but what decision would the character make in this situation? What would he decide to do, given that you know the character? And that'll narrow down only so many options. If it's Isaiah, there's only so many options. And if I'm writing Isaiah in a car chase, I'm in the car. I'm driving the car. I hear the sirens. I feel the bullets coming through the window. And because I'm driving the car, I know how many options there are. Turn left, turn right, do a U-turn, whatever it is. And that really helps me to think about it in terms of decisions, not what's next. And I do that for all the characters. Bad guy, good guy. What would he decide to do? What would she decide to do? And for the first draft comes out a big mess because frequently things are illogical or nobody would do that. Things like that. But eventually I just keep reworking it. I just keep reworking it over and over and over again. And I think I never had a definition for voice. I never had my own definition of what that meant. Other people had definitions, but I didn't. And so when I was rewriting the second book, and I'm rewriting over and over and over again, you're making thousands of choices, literally. This word over that, cut this, don't cut this, turn left, turn right, over and over and over again. Thousands of decisions. And I think cumulatively, those decisions are your voice because nobody else would make the same decisions as you. It's like having 1,000,000 words and you only use 10,000. But that assumes you asked the thousands of questions that led to the thousands of choices. And so it's sort of no rigor, no work ethic, no voice. You're almost guaranteed to be generic. And I forgot where I started.
No, no. I don't know, but one of the things that when I first read IQ, I don't know about how everybody else felt, but that it was so refreshing. You have this character. Obviously, there's your tagline. Sherlock Holmes in the hood, which is a great thing I can use to sell a book in the store because people know exactly very quickly. But there's he's one of the things I love about the character is he's not impressed by materialism. And in the first book, there's that sort of he goes to help this rap star, and it's all about flash and cars and wealth and money, and that stuff doesn't impress Isaiah, and there's this whole riff about his freedom comes from his mind, the development of his intellect.
Yeah.
And there's a powerful message there, even underneath a really hell of a fun story.
It was my revelation as a kid. As I said, I couldn't compete on any level.
And he's an outsider.
And I'm reading Sherlock Holmes. I'm going to the LA Public Library, which is gigantic. And I'm getting a book, I'm sitting in a corner, and I'm reading all day. And when I read Sherlock Holmes, I don't know how I got onto it, but here's a guy who gets through his life, solves his problems, get through the bad guys with just his mind, just his intelligence. I mean, this was a thrilling idea, to a small kid in a big neighborhood.
A little bit of chemical assistance when needed.
But
Little details.
It was a long
little
time.
cocaine.
It was sort of hope, it was sort of inspiration. Like if he could make his way in the world, maybe a kid like me could face his own world and not be afraid. And And so he's always aspirational. He was my alter ego. And he got me through a lot of situations. To be able to say, I just have to think like Sherlock. No, logically observe, understand the options, and do the smart thing. I didn't always do that, as my life attests. But he was an inspiration. He truly was.
So he's an outsider, classic outsider character in a lot of ways, and
Mm-hmm.
some really fresh ways. But it seems like these books are really also about community,
Yes.
about this small community and his fierce loyalty. And throughout the course of the books, it's like nobody can get to Isaiah, but the way to get to him is through the people he cares about.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My editor said to me, all of your books are about a dysfunctional family. There's always a father, son, mother, son, some relationship like that in it. And I think my family was so dysfunctional that anytime anybody said the word family to me, I go, why would you want one of those? And so I didn't see this until much later, but I'm writing a family. I'm writing a family of characters who help each other and believe in each other and all the things that, a normal family does. Many people grew up hard. Many people do. So it wasn't extraordinary, but I never saw the family unit. I never saw a unit. My parents we were really poor. I mean, we were seriously poor. One time my dad took me outside, pointed up the sky and says, "See that, son? That's the poverty line." It was like that. It was like that. I'd open my lunch bag and there would be a lettuce and mayonnaise sandwich. Just like that. And if gas went up, 10 cents, well, we drove less. It was that kind of existence. And it makes you very concerned about survival. It's not, I don't have any aspirations because I never thought about aspirations. It's one of the reasons I just drifted for a long time is because my mind was always thinking about survival. What am I going to do next? Where am I going to get some money? Where am I going to live? How am I going to get by? And so what do you want to be when I grow up? I'd like a bank account. That's what I would like when I grow up. So that's why I was just drifted for so long. It just seemed a real aspiration just seemed out of reach, or I just had other issues on my mind. I managed to go to graduate school, but that was only because my friends were in the program, and my friends would help me. So that was my thinking. I got a graduate degree in education. I had no interest in education, as my teaching career reflected. And I was like that for a long time. And it wasn't until I wrote a novel that I found something when I went, yeah, okay, I can do this. And I really love it. I really do. And people say you find your passion. You don't really find your passion. You develop it. You grow it like a rose bush. I would write something and it was terrible, but there was some parts of it that were okay. And so I wrote some more, and then more of it was okay, and became self-rewarding. And so I developed that passion over a number of years. And then I wrote IQ, and I knew I could write a book. And so it's grown more intense over the years. I want to write more now than I ever did. I write when I'm on vacation. My wife and I, we were in Kauai. And whenever I'm doing something stupid, she talks to me like I'm 8 years old. She goes like this. "Sweetheart, did you realize that there, right outside that window, there's a beach? You could have fun. You could go snorkeling. You like snorkeling? I got nothing against snorkeling, but I mean, once you've seen one sea turtle, it's like, I'd rather do something that was satisfying. And so, yeah, I pretty much write all the time.
always the specter in the back of your mind that you're going to be eaten? I mean, I would think that would up your constant thoughts about survival if you suspected that your siblings are going to kill and eat you.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
I mean, that's as perilous as life gets.
Because I'm snorkeling in 3 feet of water, and there was a sea bass. It must have been about 8 pounds, something like that. But his mouth was wide open. I can't swim, but I got to shore in like 4 seconds. So yes, survival.
I want to take issue with you in part about what you had to say about voice. It's true that it's a constant set of decisions. Writers are characterized, in my opinion, by constantly asking, what if? And, they see things going around and they say, what if? And then that can be the seed of a novel. And, it's all great. But it's not just the decisions that you make, Joe, but it's the words that you choose. Because the worst thing is not that you're not a skilled writer. The worst thing is to be a boring writer.
This is true.
And the boring writer depends on your word choices.
Yes.
Okay.
I think you're right.
I mean, because, I had to read a lot of manuscripts. I probably edited 900 books over the course of Poison Pen Press. And it was always about, the voice for me was always about whether I was bored. Because you can fix anything as an editor except boring.
Yes. That's
But
true.
everyone's definition of boring is different. So what was boring to me would not necessarily be boring to you. And that's why so many writers have, published some raging success after 57 rejections or whatever, and everybody's going, why didn't those early editors see, that this book was going to be like the Da Vinci Code or something? And the answer is it took that last editor not to be bored.
Yes,
And
that's exactly
to
true.
think that the structure of because you can fix the structure.
Yes.
You can help with characters, but you can't do anything about a boring voice. So
Yes. No,
you
I
know,
agree with you. Yeah.
it really is an interesting thing. But I like what you said about decisions, because you're absolutely right. In addition, it's a question of deciding which words to use and deciding how to use them.
That's true. I think a lot of people understand you have to practice creativity. You're not just creative. You have to bump your head against a writing problem over and over and over and over again until you break through. And somebody was explaining this to me better than I'm going to tell you. But there are neural pathways that are closed. And if you use that ability enough, they open. And I think, tracking myself as a writer, that's true, because I solve writing problems now much easier than I used to. Much easier. I mean, the first book was 3 years, and so I think that just by practicing creativity over and over and over again, I got more creative, and it's easier for me now in so many ways. I don't think about so much how to write it as what do I want to write. What do I do with this paragraph rather than how do I write it? Yeah.
Or you upped your skill set, by
Yes.
practicing. So Patrick, back to you. Sorry, I interrupted.
Not at all,
I
no.
really feel strongly about voice. And I
Well, I thought this is a perfect time. Do you take requests, Joe, if I ask you to read something?
To sing?
Well, something like that. No, I didn't want to get to the very end before mentioning and spending some time
Sure.
about your new character, Winnie
Sure.
Hondo,
Yes.
who's a remarkable creation. And she enters the scene in chapter 7. Do you want to give us a little taste?
Okay. Winnie Hondo was a detective at the Long Beach Police Department. She was with the department for 11 years, working major crimes the last 3. Winnie's father was Japanese and mother was Korean. Her last name was pronounced Hondo, but her male colleagues nicknamed her Handcuffs, Handout, Handgun, Handful, Handyman, Handjob. And when they were really annoyed with her, the Hand is really full of herself. The Hand is bitching at the lieutenant again. The Hand said she'd report me. Sworn female officers in the LAPD hovered around 20%. The number of Asians was about 8%. The number of female Asians was significantly less than that. Many people who met her were surprised that she was a police officer, and still more surprised that she was Asian, an aphrodisiac for a lot of men. Winnie was witness to yellow fever phenomena quite often in college. Buff white guy with his delicate Asian girlfriend. There was a long-standing, seemingly unshakable belief that Asian women were docile and submissive. I can tell you that's not true. And getting more so every day. The idea that yellow fever was an honest inclination towards long black hair and almond eyes was sketchy at best, thought Winnie. The idea also implied that women of other races were too independent and demanding, ruling out the possibility that women of any ethnicity were individuals. Shall I keep going?
Sure, why not?
Yes? Yesterday, she was assigned to a kidnapping case. The victim, Grace Monarova, white female, age 31. She was allegedly abducted by Magnus Vestergaard, a.k.a. Skip Hansen, a known felon and a suspected hitman. Grace was taken from her housemate's driveway in the afternoon. There were no witnesses, no physical evidence except a dog collar that bore no fingerprints or DNA. Grace's housemate, Deronda Simmons, explained the animosity between Vestergaard and Grace's boyfriend, Isaiah Quintave. Revenge was the likely motive. Yeah, that's how Winnie starts.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And she's going to be my next character. Nobody knows. Truly, nobody knows. So just be quiet.
All you people watching it.
Facebook audience. Well, she
Those
has a
people on the thing too.
she has a partner too, Duval, who's very memorable.
Ron Duvall is sort of an old time cop. He's a slob. He has like taco juice on his tie, and his tie's like the skinny end is 2 inches lower than the other end. He's always got stains in him. He's always eating in the car. And Winnie and Duvall can't stand each other, you know, like they can't go to two places to eat lunch. It's just too inconvenient. So they'll be at Del Taco, and he'll say, "There's nothing on the menu you will eat," and she says, "Well, you know, it's amazing what they can make with just 4 ingredients." And he says, she says, "Well, let's go to Erwa," you know, and he says, "No, I'm not eating anything that doesn't have a lot of fat, carbohydrates, and chemicals in it." And so they're a hell of a pair. They're a hell of a pair. Yeah, I like them.
So do you want me to read what Tom Nolan has to say about it?
Oh, dear, yes.
Because here's his great use of adjectives again. Many other sharply rendered characters flesh out the book. There's the mismatched police team of Winnie Hando, a Japanese-Korean detective whose wealthy father was the almond king of the San Joaquin Valley, and her scrofulous partner, Duval, who seems to supplement his official pay with cash and goods lifted from crime scenes. We also meet Jimmy Bonifant, a Sacramento drug dealer who's risen to become Hollywood's dealer to the stars. You know, Tom really gets a lot into a fairly short review, doesn't he? Words like scrofulous.
I said I loved him.
Yeah. But obviously, like Patrick, he thought that Winnie,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh, Nolan's a terrific writer. It's hard to review book.
You haven't mentioned Manzo yet either, or Manzo.
Manzo.
Gutierrez, who has a big part in this book.
Okay, we have to go back in time a little bit. In the last book, Manzo, who's the shot caller for the local Sureños 13, a Leame gang, and he the Sinaloa cartel works closely with this gang, and Manzo was supposed to do a gun deal, $1 million gun deal, but the gun was stolen from him, and it was Isaiah. Isaiah stole the gun. Now it was for a good purpose, for a white knight purpose, but Manzo doesn't care. You know, now he owes the Sinaloa cartel $1 million, and so he's in this book, he's in serious trouble. And he's the smartest gang leader you will ever read about. He invests the gang's money. He owns beauty parlors and a garage and you know, markets and things. He invests in equities. So he's a very different guy. But when Sinaloa comes to town, they take everything. They take all of his businesses and all of his money and his prestige. And it's because of Isaiah. So he's hugely motivated to take Isaiah out. So now Isaiah has two enemies, Skip and Monzo. Doesn't that sound great?
No fair telling how it comes out.
Oh, yeah, I was just about to. Yeah.
So, Patrick, what else?
I don't know. I have all these, incoherent. Let's talk just for a minute about this kid, 13-year-old kid you drop into this mix, Andy Wright.
So there's an ongoing character, TK, old man, runs a wrecking yard, neighborhood institution. Big companies have come and gone, but he's run this wrecking yard by himself for 35 years. As Isaiah said, he's got a spine like iron rebar. And he's just a neighborhood institution. He's just been there for so long. Everybody needs parts for their cars. So he one morning, he finds this kid curled up in one of the cars, sleeping. And it turns out his name is Andy. And he's, 11, 12 years old. And his mother's a drunk. And he can't stay home. And she's screaming at him all the time. So TK gives him work and gives him food. And so Andy's almost living at the wrecking yard. And he'll play a key part in the plot itself. And he'll have a number of revelations. See, I tell you about it, but
No, that's a spoiler, wouldn't it be?
he stops me.
Well, the only other thing I want to bring up, and then maybe we should open it up for questions, is unlike a lot of kind of like Jason Bourne or these characters, not that there's anything wrong with them, but he feels the effects, the psychological effects of the world that he lives in. IQ, he suffers from PTSD, and that's kind of what we'd have to go back to the previous book, what took him out of town and all this. But you talk about that a lot, the effects of violence.
Yeah. It doesn't make any difference what end you are on terms of the violence, whether you're the victim or the victimizer. Violence changes you. It changes who you are. If you've had a traumatic incident, you no longer see the world the same. Specifically rape, you do not see the world the same way. The world is not friendly anymore. You have to be wary now. You're suspicious of people. You are a new person when you're a victim of violence. And I want to write about that. A lot of books, they just leave the victims dead and see you later. But I like to talk about the effects of violence because it's a huge part of many people's lives. I've been shot at. That was traumatizing in and of itself. For a long time, that really resonated with me. And I wasn't even hurt. So I want to talk about the victims and how they're affected. I just don't want to leave them as props. I don't want to treat them as props.
It's interesting when you watch like a true crime, like if they go back in time and they investigate a famous case that happened 20, 25 years ago, and they talk to the family members, and how have they spent that last 25 years, so.
I've got an online question, and this is more about Joe's writing process. So they noticed that you mentioned that you were a pantser. Are you also pen to paper, or are you strictly a computer?
I'm computer strictly. I can't live without my computer. I can't live without Google. I'm looking something up really 5 times a page, and I'm using the source 5 times a page. So if I didn't have my computer, I would get a different job.
Should we just go ahead and answer Mark's question, which is, who is publishing your book, Joe?
Mulholland.
Mulholland, division of Little Brown. Thank you, Mark. He asks the same question every program. Sorry, Mark.
At least he's here often. I think
Yeah,
that's a
thanks,
good
Mark.
thing. Right. So I forgot. Well, I didn't forget. I just skipped over, but I really should now. For anyone who doesn't know Joe, let me just give you a moment here from the back of his book. His IQ series has won the Anthony, Seamus, and McCavity Awards and been nominated for the Edgar Barry, CWA New Blood, Dagger, and Strand Critic Awards. That's a lot.
I'm impressed.
You bet. And you've already mentioned they're currently in developed as an original TV series. But Patrick, talk to him for a moment about The Goodbye Coast, because I
Yeah.
thought this was terrific. And there have been a number of authors who have essayed Raymond Chandler and Philip Marlowe over time.
You got to admire the chutzpah to even try something like that.
It is admirable.
Tell us a little bit about your approach to this character.
Well, the assignment was a contemporary Philip Marlowe. And so I had to wrestle with what contemporary means. And I was telling Patrick that I couldn't just take Humphrey Bogart, put him in a Tesla driving down Rodeo Boulevard listening to Jay-Z. That wasn't it. And the most I could do was to take Marlowe's attitude, his cynicism, his worldview, his commitment to justice that's hidden under this, very hard exterior. That I can move forward. And then it was a question of writing it. Raymond Chandler writes in the first person. The Marlowe books are in the first person. And I tried it and I couldn't do it. It's a different skill set. It's a wholly different skill set to have one character push the whole book. Because you can do one doesn't mean you can do the other. It's like because you can play golf, it doesn't mean you can play tennis. And that's the way it was with me. I could not write in the first person. So there was nothing I could do except write the way I write, which is in the third person and multiple characters and multiple points of view and all that stuff that I usually do. So it was daunting at first. It was terrifying at first. But after I got into it, I was okay. After I learned I could write this the way I write, I was fine.
And so much of Chandler and your books are about Los Angeles,
Yeah. There's everything you want in LA. I mean, there's no character or no situation that doesn't exist in LA. So there's always material in the city itself. There's always some neighborhood, some ethnic area, something. Every bad guy you want is in LA. So, and I grew up in LA and I know the place. And so it plays a big part.
Yeah, I mean, Chandler is so descriptive. I always remember Michael Connolly says, and I do too, that every time I see a jacaranda tree, I think about Chandler when he says, the jacarandas are in bloom again. And then, of course, we all know, down on those mean streets of Manvasco, who is, what is it, neither mean nor whatever.
Yes.
I've lost
like
the
that.
whole quote. Do you remember it,
You're
Patrick?
close enough. Yeah, I'm not sure.
The character that I've read about, Winnie Hondo, I got the idea from Michael Connolly. I watched how he introduced Renee Ballard, and then how he worked her into the Bosch series. I thought that was done so well, and just with such finesse and such writing skill.
Right. And he had to do it because he's aging Bush,
Yes.
He had to do it.
Yes, I was, and then I just went, well, sure, I'll steal that up. Sure.
Well, it's great because they're both outsiders, IQ and Hondo are both outsiders, and they share that. And also it's neat having, well, tell us a little bit about how you're going to do that. I mean, because IQ, they're in the same world, obviously. And you can kind of take him off stage for a little while and bring him back as you like, right?
Yes, I can do that. I wanted a character who had a broader reach, wasn't always in the hood. So she could do stolen paintings or something like that. So I wanted a wider breadth of crime. I wanted somebody who went against the grain. Most female detectives are blue collar, suburban, something like that. And she's rich. Her father is the almond king. 100% of the almonds in the United States are grown in California. And he owns, most of them. He's a very wealthy man. So Winnie is too. And she wears designer clothes to work. She drives a Lexus. she's totally, unliked because of that. One of her colleagues said, "You don't look like a cop," and she snapped back, "Why? Because I'm not wearing a pantsuit from 1975." No, this doesn't help her image as a rich bitch. So I'm trying to go the other way with her, and have her. It's a way to have her struggle, because that's a lot about what novels are about: having a character struggle through obstacles. I mean, she's still a compassionate person, all that, but it's also fun. Have a detective drive a Lexus. That's so.
Well, Lucas Davenport, he has a Porsche, if I remember right.
Mhm.
Yeah, Lucas has money, real money.
Yeah, it's. I want to make her aspirational in the sense that she's cool. She's somebody who's cool.
Do we have questions from the audience? You guys have been pretty good.
Thank you. So you mentioned Winnie. So are you going to juggle both IQ and Winnie writing, or
No.
are you going to take a break? What are you doing
Can't do it. I'm going to take a break from IQ.
after this? This is your break time?
Yeah. I'm a little weary of the world. Not of IQ, but it's the same world and the same people. And I've written 6 books, and I want to take a break. I mean, I'm definitely going to come back to IQ, but I really want to stay fresh. I'm excited about the new character. So I'm under contract to do 1 Winnie. We'll see how it goes. Maybe it flops. You never know.
No, because it was the new detective team that made me really want to come. So my apologies for showing up a few minutes late, but it was that review. I think you, I don't know where I saw it. You posted it somewhere, and I was like, that detective team sounds great. So
I'm glad.
looking forward to it.
I'm glad. Yeah.
Can I ask one more? It's a short
Sure.
question. You came up with IQ's last name. Do you remember how you figured it out? Was it an aha moment, or was it like, this is the best I can do and it'll grow on me?
I wanted his nickname to be IQ, and I wanted him to be African American. So I'm trying to think up a name where the initials are IQ. So I'm starting with IQ before I have the name. And Isaiah fit, but then Q. So I wanted it to sound like he was African American. And I'm working around with names, and I'm playing around with syllables. And Quintabe sounds vaguely African. And that's what I settled on. So it was really math.
You were talking about developing buzz for the books. How do you get the endorsements from well-known authors to write a little blurb for you?
It's the publicity department does that. They reach out to other authors, send them the book, say, "Will you write a blurb?" Some do and some don't. So, yeah, that's the way it works. The publicity department does all that.
Authors in the same publishing house tend to write blurbs for other authors in the same publishing house to be supportive. It's a community. So you wouldn't know, but I know when I see the blurbs, Yeah.
I won't write a blurb for a book I don't like.
And you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because that's your brand, as well. When I used to send books out for blurbs, I always said that. If you don't like it, don't put your name on it because it's your brand that will suffer.
And fortunately, the publishing company doesn't tell the author who they sent out, who they want to blurb. So I don't get people
Really
mad.
good idea. So you don't get your feelings hurt, right? If somebody
That's true.
King for John Sandford.
There are authors like Stephen King who genuinely read, as far as I can tell, 23 hours out of 24 hours a day and really mean them. And then there are authors who are just being nice and, that, they probably haven't read the book. But it's kind of a community obligation kind of a thing.
Yeah, it can get political, but I read the book. If I like it, I'll blurb it.
I don't know that I call it political so much as just supportive. You want to help your editor and your
that's true.
house and all the rest of it. But then again, we come back to what I had to say about boring. If the voice or the book isn't working for you,
It's true.
whoever sent it out, or the editor who acquired it, clearly thought it was working, but that doesn't mean you would think so.
Yeah, political is the wrong word. It is like that. Yeah.
Should we end the evening with Margaret Cho, as we so often do, and how Margaret Cho figures into
Oh,
IQ's
Oh.
world. I love the story.
in the first IQ, there's a gang, and Isaiah feels that he had some part in the war starting, and one of the crossfire hit a little boy named Flacco in the head, and he had severe brain injury, and so he Isaiah feels responsible for his rehabilitation, goes to see him in the hospital all the time, and is going to arrange for his life after he gets out of the hospital. He's 10, and this little kid loves Margaret Cho. Loves Margaret Cho. Isaiah takes him to a Margaret Cho concert, and he laughs no matter if it's not funny. He laughs. and somebody asked, Isaiah asked his one of his nurses, "Why Margaret Cho? Why isn't it a pop star?" And Margaret Cho grew up in which district? Of San Francisco. Anyway, it was a really terrible district, and she was discriminated against, and she was made fun of. She really had a really brutal childhood, but she stayed on the path. I mean, Asian women were not known for their sense of humor, and so she just fought through it. She fought through it, stayed the course, and made her way her own way. So if Flacco's going to admire somebody, Margaret Cho is not a bad person. Not a bad person to look at. So that's why I got Margaret.
Yep.
Well, in that case, thank you, Joe. Always
My pleasure.
I
My
wanna
pleasure.
thank our virtual audience for joining us. I think all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, Joe will sign your books up here because he's